Hey, everybody. Welcome to The Collective. Once again, we have another awesome show for you today. We're going to obviously dive right in. But first off,
Microphone
hey, you seriously? My microphone still?
every day.
Did you
I
hear
don't
it
think it's
earlier,
I
like
don't
in
think
the
it's a
green room?
microphone's problem though. It could
It's
be a
just your
Chance's problem.
proximity, and as soon as you move your face closer to the mic, then you
I'm,
get to say, "Yeah, but it always touches my beard."
I'm,
Unlike
I'm,
yesterday
I'm
and the day
literally.
before, and the day before that.
Okay, well, let me play
Sounding
with
better
my.
already.
Okay, I'm playing with my dials. So excuse me for a second while I play
You
with my
know,
dials.
I think that really needs a shave. I think
A
I
shave.
vote
Something needs
for
something.
Chance.
I can see that. Okay,
Yeah,
hold on a second. Let me shave right now. Hey, how's that sound?
fantastic.
There we
Look
go.
at
Look at that.
that.
Quick shave.
That doesn't
Done.
tickle your beard anymore.
Not at all, actually. It's quite nice. You're gonna hear me breathing on it all day now. Uh, see, now I
Darth
have to look
Vader.
away when I laugh. It's gonna kick in
My
right
day
away.
is complete.
So we got some interesting topics here today. I'm wondering, does anybody have any thoughts, questions, introspections, perhaps, before we dive in? No, everybody
I'd
good?
just like to say good morning to Sayeh, who I've never met
Good morning.
at all in digital or organic form. So it's nice
Mhm.
to see you. I've been following you for a while on the IG, but other than that, I don't know much about you. But I'm sure I'll get to know you a bit better this morning.
Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm
The
glad that
savage.
you guys invited me. Appreciate it.
It's absolutely our pleasure. So let's dive into one of the thoughts I have here. We were talking just kind of briefly on this a little while ago, but we didn't really dive into it too deep. Was being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and I think I've heard this used all over the place, and I've heard this people say that you need to be comfortable in the uncomfortable. It's almost like you need to expect the unexpected. So the question I have really to start off with is, what does it mean to you guys? What does it mean to be comfortable inside the uncomfortable right off the bat? Who's going to take it? Seb, you're up.
All right. Well, I know what it means from the way it's written, but what is often, in my opinion, misconstrued is when if you get too comfortable with being uncomfortable, you need to change a comfort zone so you're uncomfortable again. Like if you
Mm,
stay comfortable in discomfort, you have effectively adopted a new level of ability to deal with discomfort, which means that you are now comfortable, even though from an outside perspective, you would have something that would seemingly be or would be uncomfortable, right? I don't know if that makes any sense. So I can go in the gym today and I can do a savage workout, something crazy. But then if I do something crazy every day until 6 months from now, and the crazier hasn't gotten any crazier, I'm now comfortable doing that. So I've got myself in the exact same point. It's just my baseline is elevated, right? So
mm,
it's easy to understand as a base concept. Yes, we need to be able to, if something makes you uncomfortable, this is your body attempting to tell you that you are going to die, and you understand that that isn't the case, and that the body is a very conservative machine, and that you can push way beyond that for a long, long time before you even close to death. And so this is essentially what happens. But again, if your version of being comfortable in the uncomfortableness is to remain at the exact same level, then you have achieved it at one point, but now you are behind the eight ball kind of thing. So you need to do something that makes you uncomfortable again, and makes you focus on what you need to do to adopt your new environment, your new comfort level.
yeah, that makes sense. Any thoughts, Saya?
No, totally. I agree. It's challenge yourself in pretty much in every aspect, right? It's like a good example would be um, a lot of us are uncomfortable with like search warrant writing for brand new members that are um, just coming out of, you know, depot or anything like that. It's you just have to take those files that are going to challenge you, and yeah, you can make mistakes, but um, as long as preserve life and don't get anybody else hurt, you might as well give it a shot and try. So um, totally 100% I agree. Like it's all about challenging yourself every day.
Hmm. Shaun, you want to round us off? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, sure. Just a couple of things. First thing is, coincidentally, this morning I try to spend at least an hour or two reading as much as I can. It's my time. Everyone leave me alone. Stop bugging me, world. I want to get my read on. And so this morning I was reading the book called The Patrol, which is the one I've got on the go at the moment. And I actually shot this photo up to my Instagram stories about 2 hours ago. And it's a photo of a page, one of the chapters. And I highlighted the top portion of the page. And I'll just read the highlighted portion. It's a single sentence. And it's taken from a quote from Farley Mowat from his book, The Regiment. And this is inserted into the book called The Patrol by Ryan Flavel, which I encourage everyone to read. So the highlighted sentence was this: not least of the qualities of good fighting men is their ability to endure. Now, the paragraph goes on to say bravery, military knowledge, and expert marksmanship. These things have their place in the making of a soldier, but they are as nothing if the man cannot endure the unendurable. And so, what is comfort in the uncomfortable? What is enduring the unendurable? Well, I think it's a taught thing. If you're surrounded by good men and women who understand how to be comfortable in the uncomfortable, that's a taught thing by observation. And then it's a learned thing in isolation from time to time, where you just have to set your own unachievable standards and get freaking uncomfortable with that. And so that's my first thought, is learning to endure. You can be taught it through osmosis, or you can institute it yourself in isolation. But my second thought was this: well, what is uncomfortable for me might not be uncomfortable for someone else. And so I'll use this example. I can do hard things. I can do harder things than most. I'm pretty uncomfortable with being super uncomfortable. But where other people do it better than I do is where I've got to go and get my nails done, or I've got to go for a foot massage, or I've got to look after myself. That's where I'm super uncomfortable. I'm mega uncomfortable when someone pats me on the back and says, "Good job, Shaun." I'd rather crack out burpees than get that pat on the back. I don't like burpees. And so, what is uncomfortable? I'm looking at Seb, and Seb was one of the first guys that said to me, "Dude, you're just going to have to get better at saying thanks." Because everyone was patting me on the back, and I was just like trying to throw a smoke bomb and bust out. Nowadays, I try to like at least lock them in the eye and say, "Thanks for saying that, man." And that's super uncomfortable for me, acknowledging someone's praise. So we all have our little uncomfortable moments, and it's for us to recognize that we're uncomfortable in it, and it's our job to get comfortable with it. And it doesn't always have to be scaling Mount Everest. It could just be as simple as accepting a thank you a little bit more graciously.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Actually, I think the thing that we think most when, at least the thing I think most when I hear this, comfortable and the uncomfortable, is the physical uncomfortableness. Right? It's cold out. Okay, this is hard. Okay, those types of things that are surmountable physically, that you can just either shrug off or work harder or do whatever. I think that's the corollary, at least I make in my mind, is that this statement means something physical, whereas as you said, Shaun, it can be spiritual, it could be metaphysical, it could be psychological, it could be, I know some of the most uncomfortable positions I've ever been in was sitting in a chair with my therapist staring at me going, "And how do you feel today?" Right? That was very uncomfortable. But eventually you get comfortable being there, and you eventually allow yourself to get farther in. Now, what about the people that struggle with the physical portion of it? How do we develop those around us outside of osmosis? Like, how do we physically develop those around us into being comfortable with their uncomfortableness? Anybody want to take that? Thoughts?
I just
Seb?
want to speak to something that Shaun said there. That was very valuable, because when I look at this sentence again, and I've been staring at it because it's pretty large on the screen, and at the end of the day, I think from a metaphorical standpoint, comfortableness is one thing, but I think what Shaun said about accepting, that's acceptability. So if there is a point to be uncomfortable, it's not be uncomfortable simply to be uncomfortable. What is the win condition? What is the end goal of putting yourself through something uncomfortable and being accepting? The comfort is more about being accepting. Because I will tell you this, I don't care who you are. If you're in a field and you're on selection somewhere, or you're doing whatever, if I stop you in that very moment and I say, is this awesome? You're going to be, no, absolutely not. This place is brutal. And that's just a fact. It's brutal. Are you going anywhere? Absolutely not. I'm staying right here. I'm good with that. I'm accepting of that, because the win condition at the end of it is worth the squeeze. The juice is worth the squeeze, so to speak. And so one of the problems that I see with this sentence, I've never seen it before, but I see it now after hearing about Shaun, is that if you were to tell somebody this and they take it at face value, they're going to think that at some point in your life, you felt comfortable with whatever chaos you were in. And it's very different to be able to control chaos and be present and do the hard things that you need to do in order to get to your win condition. It's another thing to actually thrive and be like, I love this. I would do it on my own time. Let's not blur the lines here. Like, sometimes being uncomfortable is completely uncomfortable, but it doesn't change that it needs to be done. It needs to happen. And that's where your will takes over. That's where you make the decision. That's where it counts.
That's a great point.
Yeah, and something else I'd like to throw in, just because what Seb has said made me want to build off it, like a new thought, if you will. And that's, it's not that I'm notorious for this. It's not even that I'm really well known for it, but I know myself to be really well known for it. And that is, I take immense pleasure in being freaking uncomfortable. It's almost like a perverse pride. It make it harder, and I'm happier. And so if I've got to go lay in a swamp for a few days and be super freaking uncomfortable, I'll whine about it in my head. But there's another voice having a counter conversation, and it's kind of along these lines. Oh, no one else has done this? No one else has done this immensely difficult thing? I like this. And so you almost take like a perverse, and you can almost, I know I can anyway, so I won't generalize. I'll talk about myself specifically. I can almost not derail from the mission objective, but I can miscalibrate against what I'm actually trying to achieve just because I'm enjoying the suck so much. And so you can try to chase comfort in the uncomfortableness of things, but you shouldn't be distracted from the overarching mission, which is whatever you've assigned as the outcome. So it's Seb's conversation that made me think I can work positive and negative on the side of uncomfortable if I'm not staying clear to my overarching objective.
That's a great point. Sayeh, you got any thoughts on that?
For me, it's more of hearing that voice in the back of my head. That's like we all have that one person that we have in the back of our head that kind of pushes us. So you just can't you can't mute it. You just have to keep pushing. And that's the biggest one. Like, it's like, yes, we're talking sometimes about physical stuff, but challenging yourself with, like, even promo, doing exams or anything like that, even with the current job, anything like that can put you out of comfort, because, you know, you're in front of people, like, just like another selection would be an interview. So that all by itself, it's having that voice in the back of your head, keep pushing, is totally it. Yeah, 100%. I agree.
Do you think this plays into integration? in that, and the reason I'm thinking about this is that when we go to basic, or we go to depot, or you go to a selection, or you do any of these things, you're trying to integrate into a new environment, which is uncomfortable, right? Because you're in a completely new environment, you don't know what's happening, and all of a sudden this, but the quicker you can be comfortable in that position, in that integration sequence, do you think that plays into it and the ability to make it through or survive or actually integrate into the team versus not integrate into the team, is how quickly you can become comfortable in that uncomfortable situation? Anybody?
Well, here's what I thought is, and I was thinking about it before you started speaking specifically about this idea. I just didn't want to throw it out because I thought it would be a little too complex or maybe distract us from the conversation. So I'll just throw it out and then see what you guys think. I think there's chasing discomfort or uncomfortable situations for yourself. But I find that no matter how uncomfortable it is for me, I'll take on double discomfort if it's for my team. So, we've talked about that in the past, not too long ago, Chance, you and I.
Yeah.
I was mentioning that, we're out in the middle of nowhere carrying the big weights, airborne shuffling down, trying to do that win. And the guy falls out. He's starting to fall back because he's hung over, etc. I've got his webbing. I've got his fighting order. I've got his weapon. I'm the guy who's having to run that across the line for him. I was already uncomfortable. Now I'm double uncomfortable. But I'm going to do that for the team. And so if you're seeking uncomfortable scenarios to try to get comfortable in them, and you're the kind of person who isn't I won't say self-motivated, but isn't self-driven, like will pursue something so hard, purely focused on the uncomfort of it. If you're not that person, you can be that person if you're now in a team setting where if your natural inclination is not to get super uncomfortable, your natural inclination might be get super uncomfortable for the guy next to you or the girl next to you if you need to help them. So individual settings, team settings kind of add a layer of nuance to the subject, I think.
That's a great point. Anybody else thoughts?
So for me, if I look at my perspective, say I was on 24, 26 selections for ERT, right, over the years. And what you said is truly accurate, and it's a tool that's utilized in selection also. It's used in that do not give them any feedback whatsoever. None. Zero nod, zero good job, zero this, zero that, zero crap, nothing. Just stone face.
And it's hard on a head.
Oh, it is. It is. And the reason why it is because from a neuroscience standpoint, when a human being knows where they stand in space and time in relation to their peers, their stress level lessens. When their stress level lessens, they become confident. When they become confident, they're dangerous. They're dangerous for two reasons. They're dangerous because it gives them the tools to make it through, assisted, because it's truly an assistance to your mindset, right? And then it also can be dangerous if they become overconfident, and this could be leading them into a physical harm situation where they think they can take more than they can chew, or worse, get somebody else hurt on account of I'm the guy. And so the answer is yes. If you can find a measure of comfortableness while being uncomfortable, say on a selection, well, good for you, but that came from the internal factors, because the external factors should be set in a ways that this doesn't happen. You need to not know where you stand in the hierarchy of things and in comparison to your peers, and you need to trust that what you're doing is accomplishing the task to the best of your abilities. And so it's a very strong neurological reaction that happens when people actually know where they stand in space and time.
That's interesting.
Wow.
Any thoughts there?
That's great. Like, it's not the not knowing factor would be the hardest, because it screws with you. You don't know, did I do it? Does he even like me? Does he want that would just make the person go crazy. I can totally see that. Oh my God, the psychological part is like, what? So no, I definitely yeah, it's like writing something and like submitting it and then not knowing if it got approved. You're like, did I do it? Did I not do it? So like it's yeah, no,
We
That's
crave
interesting.
value. We crave feedback, right? Sorry,
Mm.
sorry, Chance.
No, go for it, man.
Those are
Yeah.
all those are all things that we crave as humans, right? Value,
huge.
feedback, identity, belonging, all those things. And it's really easy to have just enough of an anchor, just enough to help you through a very difficult situation. But if that little thing hadn't been there, you may have not made it. And so we need to be self reliant. As an operator, for example, you need to be self reliant. If everything goes and you have zero to hang on to, how are you performing for the good of the collective?
And just one more layer to that, so that anyone out there who's considering this, you're not getting a feedback situation and you feel like, oh, that's no big deal. I've been in those moments before. I think I did pretty good, etc. If you're thinking that, it's probably because you weren't standing on a start line called the unknown, called the void, called I don't even know what's going to happen 1 second after the start gun goes off, called selection, as an example. So if you are stepping onto a start line, generally knowing what you're facing, generally knowing the construct in front of you, that's uncomfortable. But what's super uncomfortable is standing on the start line and not knowing what is about to occur for the next 7 days. Nothing. None of it at all. Other than choo choo freak show. And so when you're in that freak show and you're getting zero feedback other than the own feedback in your little melon, that's when things get interesting.
And they
I like
they
that.
sure do. And we have
They sure
probably
do.
I can't remember what the neurotic tendencies are for humans, but it's something about 80%. I think you were mentioning this, Chance, about 80% negative thoughts going through your minds at any given time as humans, generally. And this is hardwired in us as a result of our need for survival, right? But it is absolutely. And just like a lot of the primal reactions that we have in face of danger, it can cause issues. I'll give you an example of this. If you ride motorcycles, you will know this. But if you're in a corner and you realize that you're going too fast and you roll off the throttle, the bike stands, right?
Yeah.
So you effectively slowed down because you
Right.
perceived that you were going too fast. But by releasing the throttle, which was a natural primal reaction, you just died, right?
Yeah.
Like the bike has stood and now you're going exactly under where whatever it is that is a risk to your safety, the wall or a truck or whatever the case may be. Anyways,
We see this a lot actually out in the country. People that don't know how to drive on gravel road, right? They come into a corner, they're going too fast, and they hit the brake, right? And then they just there it goes. Same thing with ice and snow, all this stuff, right? I was thinking about this as well. Is that when we like being overseas in Afghanistan was uncomfortable, but there was a point where I was totally comfortable there, right? Walking
Right.
around looking for IDs, right? Well, yeah, cool. We're gonna
Well,
get shot at
that's
today,
when
whatever.
it's the most dangerous.
And that's exactly when it's the most dangerous. And I liken that when we came home and how uncomfortable we were just being home. Like it was a completely different world, similar to the different world when we first got there. And it's similar to going through basic or going through. But again, like you said earlier, is that there was a pretty general I have a general idea what's going on, right? I know what I'm getting myself into. I'm leaving for basic training. People are going to yell at me. I'm going to have to fold clothes, and we're going to run around a whole bunch of times, right? Even that sets an expectation. Then when it's met, you go, okay, yeah, that's kind of what I thought. But the removal of that, similar to starting a business and having no feedback right off the bat, or not selling anything, and not knowing whether people are seeing it, whether or not, when we got the collective started, same thing. We're jumping into kind of the middle of nowhere. But even then, we had some general ideas of what we were looking at. So, any tips for anybody going through the middle of nowhere for the guys that have been through the void? Any tips on how to get through it?
One step
Yeah,
in front of the other.
Yeah. Yeah, that was exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, just normally the army starts with left foot first, quick march. And so your left foot crosses the start line and it's followed by your right foot and repeat. And so that's how you do it. You step into it and you improvise, adapt, and overcome. And what does that even mean? Well, it depends on who you are. If you're a noob, if you're a, basic training day 3 or whatever the case is, versus you've been in the game a decade, you're looking at things differently. But everyone's still marching forward. It's all now perspective as contextualized against experience. And so, what's a tip? Here's a good tip: seek experiences. And if you don't have any experiences, seek people who have already had experiences and get on with that osmosis. And so you can step into a new arena, first step in, bam, there you are. And as long as you're surrounded by the right people, you'll be all right. So if you're stepping into something new, find a team to step into it with. And if you can't find a team, just step into it and get used to the idea that it might be a bit wild. But if you keep your head on your shoulders, you'll be all right. You'll get some bumps and bruises. You'll improvise, adapt, and overcome and learn from the moment. Those are called life lessons. Things that don't happen often enough, in my opinion, in our modern society. You've got to go out there, put yourself out into the mix, make some mistakes, learn some lessons, call it a life lesson, and then improve off of that moment.
Yeah. Any thoughts? Anybody else, Sayeh?
I actually have a question, more or less. How did you, during these 7 days, not, like, being an alpha personality, like, did you not kind of compare yourself to the guy next to you and be like, I need to be better than him? And, like, did you not do that?
I'll give you a funny story, and this should set an interesting, I don't know, opportunity to talk about what a idiot I am sometimes. So when I was on selection, of course, I didn't know anything about anything. Nobody knew what selection was. Selections it was the first time they were being run. And so I remember at some point, I won't say what day it was, and I won't say the specifics, but at one point, we were going to go into a combatives phase where we're all going to be tested. And we were on the shooting range at this point, all being kind of corralled in. But we were allowed to intermix with each other and talk, which wasn't too common during selection. So I remember looking at a guy, and he was a big lad, stocky, tough. He was an MP. And he said, hey, what do you think is going to happen, number X? And I said, I don't know, number X. And he said, any ideas? I said, I don't know, but whatever it is, I'm just going to kick its ass. I don't even know what it is. I'm just going to get after it. And he said, well, it sounds like they're calling us out 2 at a time. Do you think we're fighting? And I said, bro, I don't know. But if I'm fighting, whoever I'm fighting, they're going to get it. If that's what I got to do, that's what I'll do. I'll do my best. And if they ask me to punch something hard, I'll punch it hard. That was our conversation, generally speaking. We both got called out together. And I'm thinking like, oh, we're going to go kick ass, whatever that means. And at one point, as I was seeing white dots, because I'd just been punched in the face again by him, we were looking at each other, remembering the conversation of, whatever it is, I'm going to kick its ass. And the guy that I told that to was the guy who was trying to kick my ass. And it was full well known. We were super clear on why we were there. We were there to kick ass. And it just meant that we were going to kick each other's ass after agreeing that there was going to be some ass kicked. It was uncomfortable, man. But I had to get right with it because, again, mission focus. What was the outcome that I was searching for? I was searching for a positive outcome. I wanted to win in that process, whatever that meant to me. And win at that time meant pass this selection and see what the next phase brings me. What's phase 3? What's phase 4? What's a badged member? What am I going to do? I didn't know any of those things. I just knew the problem in front of me was the guy who just punched me yet again in the face. So I think how did I proceed through selection, not knowing anything about anything? Everything that stepped in front of me was the job at hand in that moment. It didn't matter what it was. It got my best effort.
That's a great way to put it. Seb, you got any points?
Excuse me, I don't know what's up with me. I feels like I got a cat in my throat or something. Yes,
Breathing in that mustache.
That's probably it. It's probably it. I'm gonna shave next. I'll be all clean shaven.
There you go.
Or actually, I wouldn't. But
Get some
anyways,
mutton chops. You'd be solid.
one of the things that I like to do with my people that come to me for ERT selection prep, and I have a bit of with Raven Strategic, a bit of a psychological sort of, how can I help somebody prepare, and anybody who comes through who wants to some help can get the help, and the help isn't in the form of telling them what selection is all about. The help isn't in the form of compromising selection, because I would never do that on account of any amount of money. But what needs to happen is for them to control the things that I worry about when I embark onto anything. Me, that is it. I don't care at all what the other person is doing, whatever. Like, how can I control me and maximize and optimize my performance? And one of the ways to do this is preemptively do not put an end. Preemptively do not try to foresee what's coming. Preemptively don't try. All you need, those are the mechanisms. What you are focused on is how you're going to react to how you feel. When I feel like quitting, when I feel like my family is missing me, and all of a sudden do I really want this, really? Or whatever the case may be, when those voices are starting to come out, how are you gonna stop them? How are you gonna stop them dead in their tracks long before it starts? And one of the ways to do this when you go to selection, and I always hear this, like, oh, this guy went and he was better than me and he didn't make it and all that. Like, I don't care. Like, you don't know what happened there. You have no idea. So leave that behind and let your work and the result of your selection tell you where you stand. But for me, it was all about, when I went to selection, I knew it was 5 days. It's 5 days. It's 24 hours. Yeah, it's not, because, there's a tiny bit of rest, but say you have 24 hours in each of those days. At the end of those 5 days, there isn't the 25th and the 26th hour. It's over. So you can do whatever you want with me. I relinquish all comfort. I relinquish everything that I generally would be seeking on account of spending those 5 days doing whatever it is that's the task that's assigned to me at the time. And I never look for an end of that task. I never look for when my next meal is. I never look for when I go to sleep and I'll get some rest. I never look for any comfort whatsoever. My family, all these other things, I just completely shut it down. Take your shield, take your sword, and go to battle and come back successful or dead. Like, don't start, going down the mental drains that are going to be inherent. And it has to be a preemptive decision, because if you wait for game time to do that, there's going to be little voices lying to you, and there'll be lots of them. They'll be lying to you, and you'll start believing them because you're vulnerable. So make yourself invulnerable before you start. That's kind of one of the ways that I address that with my clients.
I love that. That's the Spartan creed of come home with your shield or on it, right? And as you guys were talking about this, it kind of reminded me of, many cultures on the planet have a rite of passage, right? You turn 13 and there's like a trial that you have to get through in order to become a part of the tribe or a member of the team.
I believe it's called
whatever.
Call of Duty. Most 13-year-old boys are playing it right now.
Absolutely, right? Like this, if
That's
you can
in
get
North
onto the
America.
leaderboards, this is what I was going to ask, was
Correct.
that, do you think that within North America we've relinquished those things completely? And that,
Yes.
so here's the question then. Do you think that we can get it back? Do you think that we could maybe develop something within the culture to, I don't know, harden people up, for lack of a better term, but like at least maybe get them in touch with themselves in a more permanent manner? I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, people have got to want to. And right now, they don't want to, because they don't have to. And the have to part is when things go really sideways. And now it's a national issue. Maybe not. Let's crazily call it World War III.
Okay.
That's what's required to get everyone focused nationally. And then that kid gets to decide, you know what, I'm just going to ignore World War III. I'm just going to get on with Call of Duty right in my mom's basement. And so, that's one way to deal with World War III. The other way to deal with it is, here's the real world. I've got to deal with it. And so that's kind of what I see happening across North America to some degree with young men and women is they're escaping the real world through video games as an example. And I don't want to throw the entire video industry under the bus. There's many other things that people will distract themselves with, many substances, many things that they will use as a proxy to escape what is actually in front of them called the actual world. The world's struggles, their own personal struggles that they don't want to deal with, all of the uncomfortable things that are making them feel uncomfortable are not being addressed because they like comfort. And so, as a North American society, I think that we're one of the weakest societies out there right now, North America, in context of Europe, in context of Asia, in context of Africa, and name a continent, name a culture. We're probably the weakest right now. Now, I know there's a segment of North America that have swords and have shields, and they're tough, they're hard, they're focused, they're deliberate, they're on mission. Whether they're in the military or not is immaterial. They know the deal. They're staying focused. They're on the path. Whether World War III ever happens or not is immaterial to them. They live their life in a way that has some sort of warrior ethos. They're not focused on hoping that World War III occurs. They're focused on being the best version of themselves to deal with the uncomfortable moments that they're right in front of them or are in the future. And so, again, I think that North America needs to pull up its socks in respect to this. And so one thing that I feel I failed to answer for you, Sayeh, is when during selection, one of the things that is really uncomfortable is not getting that feedback loop, as Seb said. So, I can recall several times through selection where I feel that I might have made a mistake. And it was a minor mistake, but it was a mistake. And in my head, I was like, oh man, did I just blow it? That's a really unique situation for a guy like me at that time, because I'd never faced a situation where I was doubting my performance and not getting immediate feedback. And so what I had to learn in selection that was never taught to me, but I wish it had been taught to me. And so I'm throwing this out there as a tip, I suppose, is in the moment where you're not getting feedback and you're doing super uncomfortable stuff, if you think you're screwing it up, you need to instantly get right with putting that moment in the rearview mirror and facing the immediate threat, the immediate problem, the real time now. You've got to focus on doing that, not focus on the processing 10 seconds ago or processing an hour ago. You can't be all up in your melon thinking about the things that you didn't get feedback on, but you think you might have done wrong, that you can't change at all. You've just got to proceed forward. And that was something that wasn't taught to me. I had to figure it out in the real time. And it's something that we all need to get better at, I think.
That's super hard.
Yeah.
It's super hard to focus. You're like, yeah, did I screw that up? Are you sure you didn't?
I wonder, because Sayeh, you've been, your family emigrated to Canada when you were young, right?
I was 12, yes.
Did you find a similar feeling in this when you first arrived and being just completely
lost,
lost, right? Do you think it would be of the same kind of area? Same mentally?
I wish I was younger because it makes it a little bit easier. But at the same time, the opportunities I've got because I came later in my life to go overseas and actually translate and be part of big files right now in RCMP. So, I mean, I definitely am happy now, but at the time, it's you don't even understand if you're getting a feedback because it's not even in the language that you're supposed to understand. So kind of like a nod would be better than nothing, but definitely it's we were just talking about it, and Shaun mentioned it earlier, that whenever somebody gives you a compliment, you don't kind of want to hear it and it makes you uncomfortable. My psychologist calls it my black hole, where it just goes in and sometimes it sticks around it. So I can understand that. Even back when I was a kid, I didn't understand. Even if someone was giving me a compliment of, oh no, you're doing better, I would just minimize it because I needed to kind of go surpass that point and be better than the other person that's in the room that's learning the same language. So my verbs are still in the wrong place. I would have been better in French, but at least I'm working up to it for sure. It's,
yeah, it's tough. Languages especially. I know little bits and pieces of Hebrew that I learned when I was younger, and Middle Eastern languages are not easy to translate in English. We don't. The one thing I've learned about English, from what I've heard from people that learned English as a second language, was that English is the hardest language to learn as a second language because we have all of these rules and none of them make sense.
And at the same time, the exceptions to every rule is one. And at the same time, I think you can understand this. The lost in translation is actually a thing.
Oh yeah.
Where when you're bringing it from one language to another and it still doesn't make sense, and you have to break it down into what that word actually means and try and define it even more than it means. So when you're, for instance, reading the charter card in Farsi, that still doesn't make sense. Like, it's so written weird and it's so legally written that you actually have to translate what you're translating already. So overseas, one of the biggest ones that was really uncomfortable is I can hear what people want to do to the members that are going into that area. So my defense is already up, and like all the other members are feeding off of me. Like when they see me all jacked up but again, I'm just a black box in the room when you're a translator or you're listening into the translators. So you don't want to interrupt the meeting between the two people that are actually meeting. You're just a black box in the room, but it's really uncomfortable when you hear the hatred sometimes a different nation feels about you just because of the fact that you're putting on a uniform. So it was a challenge for sure.
Anybody got any points on that? On integration, on anything else, Seb?
Just about language. That's what makes, as Sayeh is pointing out here, the translating of information from one language to the other is much more than written and oral. It's actually, there's other complexifying factors such as culture and history, and there's a lot of information there. And if you don't know anything about, say, the region where you are, or its culture, or it makes it very, very difficult, even if you can actually speak the language proper. You need to be transferring meaning, not words, right? Like, and that's what makes this so very difficult, but also so valuable.
That's a great point, because if you can transfer meaning without specific language, that's a much more communicative desire. I think, Shaun, you were talking about this as well, is that you were in Italy and you weren't able to speak much of the language, but the body language and exactly what you had an intention about you that people could read versus actually hearing the language. Am I
Yeah, that's 100%. And it's, you can manipulate that in all kinds of ways. If I'm walking down a sidewalk in any part of the world, it doesn't matter where, and I don't want you to talk to me, you ain't gonna talk to me, because I'm gonna give off that vibe. And so if I want to talk to you as I approach you down the sidewalk, I'll talk to you and you'll want to talk to me because I'll give off that vibe. It's about, back to the topic at hand, being comfortable in the uncomfortable. The only way that you can really use it as a tool, or as a scalpel, or as a weapon, or as a opportunity, whatever framework you want to use to wrap your head around the idea that we all can manipulate the time and space in front of us. But it's up to us to understand that we can, then to learn how to do it, then to be sensitive to the moment, and then strategically and tactically manipulate what's in front of us so that it's not just a win, it's a win-win. And so that's how you change real-time situations, is be sensitive to what's in front of you, give off the right vibe, manipulate the real time for a win-win.
Interesting.
Wow.
Anyway,
You know that. Sorry.
go ahead. Seb, go ahead.
No, you just excuse me. Just to add to this a little bit, again, because it's cool. Like when you have conversations like this, and then something kind of
100%.
Yeah, it's so cool. But one of the things so I was taking this course in university, and then this professor is telling us about the languages and how things can get screwed and all this stuff, and basically what he was doing was valuable, and it was warranted. Like we needed to know that intercultural communication is challenging, and some of the traps that you can fall into can actually break down communication to a point where that communication is no longer occurring, and that's a critical problem. It can be catastrophic, especially in the context of first response or military operation or whatever the case may be. But one of the things that he never spoke about was what is on the receiving end of that communication. So say you're the person that is the speaker of the language of the language that the person is coming and attempting to communicate with you with their knowledge of that language. And if you don't have the same amount of flexibility, you're going to create a situation which is the opposite of the person saying the wrong thing, is you taking what they said to be the wrong thing. So everybody is trying to control external factors. You must speak to me in a way that respects me. You need to understand that I am not a native speaker of your tongue. Therefore, I don't know some of the things. So you need to be a little bit more lenient in receiving. And yes, I'm going to make mistake, those types of things. So we have to meet somewhere in the middle. I don't like the whole, listen, if you're going to speak to anybody in a different language, you better be mindful of this, and make sure that you're absolutely in line with whatever it is that they go by. Well, I'm sorry. Like if somebody says, is your meal good? And you go like this and you do that in some country, it basically means this, right? And so how am I to know that, right? But if the person knows that you're a foreigner, that you're not from there, and that in other countries this isn't an offensive thing, then they can take action and be like, hey, just be careful when you do this here, right? It means this, or whatever the case may be. I guess I don't like the way humans in general try to control all the external factors but never focusing on themselves. It's like, I'm going to focus on me, try to be the most respectful speaker that I can be with you in your own language, but I'm not a native speaker. You are going to be receptive to the fact that I'm not a native speaker and that I'm really trying and that I'm going to make mistake along the process, and we meet in the middle,
That's a great point. I used to work in this restaurant, and one of the line cooks was Japanese, and I don't know Japanese. I like little bits and pieces from reading a book, right? You guys have read Shogun, I imagine. Great book. There's lots of little pieces in there on how to speak Japanese, but anyway, he at one point he used to make my meals for me while we were working, and I thanked him, and I called him. I used the suffix sama instead of san, and it's more respectful, but it's an unwarranted level of respect. And he was offended right off the bat, and he was just like, dude, you cannot, no, you can't use that, it's too much. And I, having no idea, I was just like, well, I thought it was a sign of respect. It's like calling someone sir. And he's like, no. No, you basically gave me a knighthood that, like, we're way above where we shouldn't be. You shouldn't be using that unless it is a extreme level of respect. And but you're right in the fact that it is a two-way street. And that I thinking, hey, I'm going to be respectful by being overly respectful comes from, again, the Western style of formalities, right? So if I want to be formal, then I'm going to continually upgrade my level of formality. But in Eastern cultures, that's not always done, and you have to earn those titles and earn those moments, and it's a totally different style. And I liken this actually to what we're talking about of being comfortable and the uncomfortable, is that if you're going to communicate with somebody, you have to do your best. But you cannot expect the other person to either A, hold you accountable, or B, completely throw you under the bus. You just have to go into that conversation you're okay, let's kind of see what happens. And I remember being in Montreal and going into a restaurant, and the door opened and they went bonjour, and I went bonjour, and they went hello. And I was like, really? Like, I'm trying, but it's the expectation that you're either perfect or you're not. It's too one-sided, as you were saying, Seb, versus being a back and forth. Any thoughts on that? Anybody else?
Energy, your
Energy, there you
vibe,
go. Yeah.
synchronizing, getting right with the moment and being the right vibe. So that Montreal situation, you swing the door open, they say bonjour, and you say bonjour.
I didn't say it like that.
I know you didn't, because you're not that ignorant. And so the other way is you swing that door open, they say bonjour, and you look at them and say, hey, bonjour. I don't speak French, but I heard the restaurant's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah.
So there's a whole different vibe. You don't even have to say a word. You can just look at them, nod, and say, and carry on. And so you want to show up with as a bro vet with your Oakleys and your hat on backwards and walk in like you own the place. You don't have to say a word. You're already screwed. But if you walk in as a bro vet, giving off that image, and someone says bonjour, and you look at them and say, what's up? As long as you bring the right vibe, everyone will overlook your inability to say bonjour correctly. And so it's not sometimes just communicating with words. It's about holding your space right. And the idea that a lot of our communication is done just by Mark one eyeballing someone. The moment that you lock eyes, you can either have a twinkle in your eye, a glint in your eye, or a steely, flinty look in your eye, and you'll get 3 different responses. So it's not just about making the restaurant staff comfortable with trying to spit out a bonjour. It's about just, what's up?
Yeah. That's a great point. Anybody else? Seb?
Yeah, just the obviously the flip, not the flip side of this, but the other side of the coin is there are always going to be ignorant people. There are always going to be ethnocentrism and all these other things that are contributing to a person's ability to respond, even to the most positive of the vibe, display. But at the end of the day, this is you trying to control external factors again. You came upon somebody that perhaps has had something going on, in their life today or whatever the case may be. What Shaun is referring to is controlling the internal factors. Like, this is where you need your focus. And you do exactly that. And if the person reacts adversely to this, you don't discourage yourself from continuing to do that because you met one of the outliers that are going to react that way to you. It's not about you. It was never about you. It's about themselves, their insecurity, their whatever they're carrying around all day that thankfully you don't have to carry.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
I have a quick example after you're done, Shaun. Go for it.
And so to feed that into what we were talking about earlier, as I walk in, they hit me with a bonjour, and I go, hey, what's up? If they're not into that, all right, here's my next branching point. Cool. I don't need your feedback. I've already rear view mirrored it. I'm already proceeding forward with the mission. And so that's selection, baby. If you get all wrapped up, all wrong, because someone said bonjour to you wrong, or you said bonjour back to them, just as you're about to go through the door, if you're still all 10 seconds later up in your head thinking, why did he look at me that way? That's just not the way to run life. If there's always going to be someone out there who just doesn't groove on you. And so you just got to bounce through that, carry on, mission objective, even if that's to get the world's best poutine. Don't get all wrapped up around what happened at the front door. Get wrapped up in the poutine.
Or as we call in Alberta, the Putin.
Poutine.
I said that was to a French person. They were not happy. Sayeh, could you? You had a point.
Well, I was 20 when I was overseas, so just
Yeah.
imagine having a 40-plus-year-old man that has to listen to a 20-year-old with no headscarf and is a neighboring country. To be honest, I just said, I'm like, I'm your voice. I'm the only way you can communicate with these people. So you better be nice to me. And the whole attitude changed. I was like, man, I'm your lifeline. You want stuff out of these people? I'm your voice. So it started out really mean at the beginning of it. That's like, oh, you're 20 and you're not married, and all these like negative things that came out. I was like, yeah, well, I'm your only voice here. So tough.
Well, that's
So-
good because you're establishing the difference between a tool and an asset.
Yep.
So,
Someone wants to treat me like a tool. That's a pretty short relationship. Someone wants to treat me like an asset. Now we're good to go.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great point.
the
So
whole table
we're
changed.
the what? Sorry.
The whole table changed at that
Oh,
point.
no doubt. I can imagine that. Yeah, and being held accountable too, right?
And rightfully so.
Yeah, absolutely. We're almost at an hour now. I'm just wondering, anybody got any final thoughts? Anything on comfortable and in the uncomfortable, being communicative, your vibe? Any final points? Go around the table. Seb?
Do we have any questions or no?
No, it's been quiet. There've been people watching, but I think they're just like enthralled by the conversation because it's been awesome.
Yeah, no, I got
Any
nothing to
thoughts?
say.
Nothing? Okay. Sayeh, any final thoughts on comfortability?
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate you guys
no
having
problem.
me.
You got an open chair here anytime, and we do this every day, so you're good to go.
Awesome.
Shaun, any final thoughts?
No, nothing much more to add to the conversation because if we were to continue adding, 4 days later, we'd still be talking about points on comfortable and the uncomfortable. We're only wrapping up right now because of the timeline.
Yep.
We're not wrapping up because the conversation is over. And
No.
so I just want to say thanks to Sayeh for coming out on this first seating and restaurant. I'm just talking about restaurants and food today. So thanks for showing up and bringing your experience and your observations through your career, and more importantly, adding fuel to the fire in this conversation. Thanks, Seb, as always, and hope to see you again in the future, Sayeh, on whatever we're talking about in the future.
Yeah. I'll finish off with a quick story here about communication too. You guys know what a dépanneur is? No?
Say
Apparently
what? Can you get a little
dépanneur.
closer to your microphone there, please?
Dépanneur.
A
A
convenience store?
dépanneur? Is that
Yeah.
like a grocery store in
There you go.
Quebec?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
So I had never heard of this before, and my wife, who was born in Montreal, she has a cousin who lives there still. She flew into Canada, and she was staying with us for a little while and helped us out when we first had our son, our oldest. And it was all good. We were hanging out. She speaks English great. She speaks French great. But at one point, she came up to us. She was like, "Oh, I need to get some stuff, dude. Where's the dépanneur?" And we're like, "The what?" She's like, "Yeah, the dépanneur." I'm like, the what? She's like, "Yeah, just where you go and buy stuff." And I'm like, "The store?" She's like, no, I don't want to go to like a store, like the dépanneur. And I'm like, okay, you said it like 3 times. I don't know what it actually means. And then we actually had to break it down. We went for a drive around the neighborhood. I'm like, can you point to one? Like, can you show me what it actually is? She was referring to like a Max, like a little convenience store, right? Which you guys know what it is, but just something as simple as that, in that it is a colloquialism of the area. And even if you said it, and even if you knew what it was, if there's no translation to it in that area, that's something to be aware of. You just got to be maybe you have to go for a drive. Maybe you got to go pointing some stuff, right? But this is how we learn, which enables us to grow, enables us to build. So we'll keep doing this every day, and we'll see y'all tomorrow on the collective. Chimo, everybody.
Chimo.